Joe Louis, world champion, karate fighter, kickboxer, movie star, as well as an acclaimed martial arts innovator and teacher. Joe Louis, who is considered one of the greatest martial artists of all time, was born March 7th, 1944, and passed August 31st, 2012, at the age of 68. Black Belt Magazine and others have considered him to be the greatest karate fighter of all time. In this episode, let's discuss Joe Louis. Late 1960s and 1970s, there were really five main stars in the United States when it came to the martial arts. One was, of course, Bruce Lee. There was Chuck Norris. There was Sonny Chiba. There was also Jim Kelly. And there was Joe Louis. One of the things that made Joe such a star, he was on all the major covers of martial art magazines back in the late 60s and 70s. Why? Well, because he's a world champion point fighter, and that was back in the blood and guts era, but he's also the first heavyweight champion kickboxer, or also known as full contact karate. And of course, he'd eventually find his way into the movies and television, and the rest, as they say, is history. The younger generation just probably can't even fathom when I try to even talk to some of the younger martial artists. They kind of stare at me. When I'm trying to compare them to dogs, but when a dog looks at you, he's kind of trying to figure out what you're saying. It's kind of the same way when I speak to younger martial artists about the 70s and the early 80s when I was a teen and in my early 20s, couldn't wait for the next Black Belt magazine or Fighting Stars magazine or Warriors magazine or Official Karate, any of those magazines, because that's where we got so much information. There's no internet. Picking up all these martial art magazines and then listening to the stories of old. Joe Louis is one of these bigger than life figures in the martial arts world. I was moving up the belt ranks and going to tournaments and meeting other martial artists. I would eventually meet people who had gone to a tournament maybe in Texas or in the East Coast or the West Coast, and they ran into the likes of a Bill Wallace or Joe Louis. And by the time I met them, Joe Louis and Bill Wallace have already retired, they were able to inform me about their exploits. And it's really interesting because I couldn't wait for the movie Jaguar Lives to come out. I think that I saw that movie in the summer of '79, right before my 9th grade year of high school. And it was larger than life to go see it. This big major movie with Joe Louis, the legendary figure who I've seen on the cover of martial art magazines and articles of him and people mentioning him all the time. And I can think of Sensei Jerry Williams, Ishiru Karate Sensei, who had talked to some of us about the psychic that Louis had. I used to hear about the exploits of this explosive psychic that would just go pop and just explode into people and knock them down. And Sensei Williams had once mentioned how Louis used to hit just right above the hip line to help kind of take out their weapon and make their lead leg or their kicking leg a little bit slower. It helped me learn how to throw the psychic both defensively as well as offensively, explosively. And so just in my imagination of seeing those frames when they would show Joe Louis throwing a sidekick or Bill Wallace, and the sidekick became one of my favorite weapons. And even though I'm 60 to this day, almost 61, I still use that sidekick extremely effectively against people my old age. And should I say when I'm conducting a seminar with younger people who want to go ahead and spar. And I owe a lot, of course, to Bill Wallace as well as Joe Louis, just from the magazines and people talking about him, all those frames, how to throw a technique of which he may have been featured. It brings back excitement. I almost feel like I'm reliving looking at the pictures this day or reading those articles. In '89, I met Soki Bobby Briggs, and Bobby Briggs was teaching on the base at Clark Air Base, and we just happened to run into each other. I was a cop, he was a cop. We didn't work the same shift. He was an investigator. I was working a regular shift as a patrolman, and I was working on the law enforcement desk that night, and he came up and he was talking to me, and we just kind of had hit it off. This is like our second time talking, and one of the guys was kind of joking around with me, and they didn't know I had new martial arts. And what would you do here? I think his name was Alvarez. And I finally got kind of tired of it as I was talking to Bobby. And so I threw a kick at his head real high. And Bobby goes, "Oh, you know martial arts." And Alvarez kind of backed up like, "Oh, okay." And got us talking because he was teaching on the base. And I was looking to continue my training, but I hadn't found anywhere on the base, at Clark Air Base, that I wanted to train. And that's another episode to talk to you about the martial arts that was on that base as well as off base there in the Philippines. So I started training under him at his school that he was renting out a part of the facility from the Girl Scouts. Well, it turns out not only was he a fan of Bill Wallace like I was, he was a real big fan of Joe Louis. And what's also very interesting is he belonged to WMAG, World Martial Arts Group, who was headed by a guy named Dr. Jerry Beasley. And you may have heard Dr. Jerry Beasley, who taught martial arts and became a minor at the university he was teaching at. But he was also the head of the World Martial Arts Group. The president at the time was Joe Louis, and the vice president was Bill Wallace, and the other two were Jeff Smith. You may know him. He was a PK light heavyweight champion, and Steve Nasty Anderson, who was a point champion. They were the board of directors of WMAG. So I was so excited to be a member of WMAG and to participate and learn under Silky Bobby Briggs, who knew Joe Louis. Joe Louis is what helped certify his system, and he got to know him pretty well, and they're both North Carolina guys. That's where Joe Louis was born and raised, and so was Bobby. And so we used to always banter back and forth who would win. And when we actually had a kickboxing match, it went 10 rounds. He and I finally had a match of our own, and we had advertised it, and we kind of made a joke. He had blonde hair like Joe Louis. I can't remember exactly what we called him, but we called him like, Bobby Golden Hair Briggs or something like that. And kind of like Joe Louis was Golden Boy Joe Louis. And mine was like Ken Super Feetsy Herford, similar to Superfoot. And we had, I'd drawn these pictures of us and we put it on basically a poster to advertise our fight. So it was just fun, amazing, and just neat how those worlds sometimes synchronize together where you meet people and you go like, "Oh, you're like me, you love these people." Except he got to know them very well. He's also very good friends with Bill Wallace to this day. And it's just a great pleasure because I've got to vicariously live through people like him and other people I've known who got to meet him, as well as be introduced to such great martial artists because of my connections to someone like Bobby Briggs or Dan Hecht. So Soki, Bobby Briggs, and my Goju instructor, Hanchi Dan Hecht, have been very important to me to meet some of my childhood heroes. And Joe Louis fought everybody in the point tournament system. He and Chuck Norris were probably the premier fighters of their day. They fought 3 times, with Joe winning once. But the innovations that he and Chuck both brought out into the martial arts are just phenomenal. Joe Louis also, at the same time, though, participated in full contact. He was the first world heavyweight full contact karate champion, fighting Greg Baines. And, of course, at the time, they couldn't really find anybody who would want to fight. And he tells a story how Greg Baines was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." And they fought, and he knocked Greg Baines out in the second round. And, of course, after that, it became a much more professional martial art, developing into the Professional Karate Association, or the PKA, by the mid-'70s. Joe would come out of retirement after he did the movie Jaguar Lives. He'd come out of retirement and fight in full contact karate again for a brief period of time. Here he is with fighting Melvin Coles. And a lot of these fighters were much younger than he was. And he had some pretty good success in the beginning. Of course, Father Time catches up to us all. And also when you're doing movies and television, it's kind of hard to stay fully engaged in full contact fighting. But you can see here his ability to strategize against a obviously much younger man, and he was able to win by a knockout. Joe Louis was a great innovator. He took a lot of Bruce Lee's principles and adapted them to professional kickboxing. This idea especially of movement, of not standing in a fixed position like he did when he was a point fighter. And not only was he successful, but many other fighters became successful due to a lot of his ideas. In 1991, he and Bill Wallace would come out of retirement and do a fight. He was 45 years old, and they did a 9-round PKA exhibition match. But they actually fought pretty hard and popped each other pretty good, just to show you in your 40s you can still come out and fight. You can just see that psychic he just threw on Bill Wallace right there. Joe Louis was a master instructor on how to break down a technique. Here, I'm going to be quiet and just take this next minute and watch Joe Louis teach on how to throw a punch.
Watch the breakdown. Now, if you're working on this technique, try to do it in front of a mirror. Instead of facing the mirror directly, sort of turn on a quarter angle. And try it so you watch the mirror and watch your hand at the same time. Now watch my hand slowly. This is called sequence of motion. It's very important. And I'm taking my time here because I don't know of a faster technique. First, the hand falls. Watch my hand. It falls until the hand is pointing straight at my opponent's face. Second step, my elbow moves. Watch the elbow. The elbow starts to carry the hand forward. Now, just before the elbow straightens out, see it's not quite straightened out, now it is. Right at that point, that completes my initial move. That's called the initial move or your starting motion. Watch me pull it back now. Watch again. Fist falls, elbow starts to extend, stop. That completes my initial move. That's the most important part, making sure the hand goes before the body. Second step, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lean the body, shift my weight as I start to torque, and at this point here, complete the footwork as I complete the punch.
Joe Louis, karateka, point champion, full contact champion, master instructor, and martial art movie star. Thank you so much for the memories you provided. May your memory be eternal. Os.